Do you want to make awesome beer? Well, of course, everybody does. But are you missing the mark or maybe missing some characteristic in a beer that could make it go from good to great? Well, you're in luck because today we're going to talk about the characteristics of beer and how you can change each individual component in order to meet maybe a BJCP style guideline or just your taste preference. For instance, you can make your beer have more hop forward flavor at the end, get some more aroma. Maybe you're wanting to make your beer more light and crisp and less malty. Maybe you want more sweetness in your beer to meet a style guideline for a porter, for instance. Well, I'm going to show you how to do that very simply by looking at each individual characteristic of the beer and how you can change that as you're developing a recipe. Or maybe you already have a great recipe and it's just about changing a small thing in your process. But before we get started, I want everybody to hit that like and subscribe button, grab yourself a beer, and we're gonna get after it. Also, if you want to be super awesome, hit that join button below and become a channel member. Channel members enjoy awesome perks like getting my videos early, brew day sheets, and exclusive recipes for members only. So hit that join button and become awesome. Cheers. All right, so most of you may have heard me say BJCP. What the heck does that mean? Well, it means Beer Judge Certification Program. And it's what judges use when you enter a beer into a competition to see if your beer meets those style guidelines. On the BJCP website, they have style guidelines for each beer style. And as judges are looking or as others are tasting your beer, they're wanting to have those same type of characteristics because they know that when they order a porter, for instance, that they want a certain taste, flavor, aroma, etc. So first, let's just go through the score sheet that judges use in order to rank that specific style. It looks a little something like this. As you'll notice at the top, there's a place for judges' information. This stuff really doesn't have anything to do with your beer, just really who is judging it. The second section at the top is regarding the style. What style did you enter your beer in? And any special ingredients you might have used. For instance, in some fruit or spice category, you may need to enter something there in order to identify what that fruit flavor or spice is that they should be recognizing. Next is a whole list of off flavors. I did a video on some common off flavors that I'll have a video in the link description below that you can check out. But this is a full list. If they taste something in your beer, they can go ahead and check something on this left-hand side. But the next section is really the meat and the feedback that you're going to get on your beer. Everything from the bottle inspection, from when they first get it, to the aroma, the appearance, the flavor, mouthfeel, and overall impression. This is where they're going to be scoring your beer. This section at the bottom is really the overall impression and results based on the scoring above and where they thought your beer fell in comparison to the BJCP standard. So for instance, on the BJCP website, using American Light Lager style as an example, they go through what the appearance, aroma, flavor, mouthfeel should be. They'll also go through some vital statistics, what the IBU should be, what the SRM should be, what the original gravity should be, and final gravity, where that should end up for an overall ABV between 2.8 and 4.2%. They also give some commercial examples at the bottom here that talk about what things that you could buy in the store that would meet that BJCP style guideline. So we're going to quickly go through the other categories, aroma, flavor, mouthfeel, very quickly, just so you guys get an idea of what the judges are looking for each of these categories. First, aroma. The judges are looking for malt, hop, and ester or other aromatics, right? So BJCP descriptions for an ESB might be a hop aroma moderately high to moderately low, and they may talk about caramel components in there, some fruity esters, generally no diacetyl, although they say very low volumes are allowed. So you can have some of those off flavors in there depending on the style. So how do you change your aroma if you're not getting those type of flavors? So under the BJCP style guidelines, you're gonna look at the aroma characteristics and try to match those. And so you're gonna choose hops that are specific to those characteristics. They stated floral, citrusy, piney, etc. To get those aromatics, you really need to add some of those hops later in the boil, or even dry hop if appropriate for your style. And that's gonna help bring out more aromatics in your beer at the end of the day. Here's an example of crush hops that I used recently in a hazy IPA. Looking at the chart on the right, you'll see that you get that sweet fruit, citrus, green fruit, berry flavors, all kind of shining through. If you're doing something that doesn't have that listed as aroma or flavor, you may not want to use that particular hop. So these charts are really, really crucial in finding a hop that works for your beer style. Same goes for malts. You can find an example like this one for biscuit malt. That one also talks about the color, which we'll get to in a minute when we talk about appearance, but also talks about some flavors and aromas that you might get from this particular malt. It's a toasted malt that might give it some biscuit or warm bread aromas as part of that. And so not only will it impact flavor, which of course malt does, but it may help you with that aroma depending on your beer style. And last but not least, yeast. Yeast also impacts that aroma, right? And so in this particular case, you can also look up an example, for instance, from White Labs. This one is for a Hefeweizen ale yeast. They give a similar descriptive characteristic here that shows the banana, fruity, clove flavor profile for this particular yeast. And so that will really help you when picking out something for your particular beer. Next, we're going to move on to appearance. So judges are looking for color, clarity, head retention, etc. Using that ESB example from BJCP descriptions, the appearance should be light amber to deeper copper color and good to brilliant clarity, meaning it should be really clear. It should have moderate white to off-white head, and a low head is acceptable when carbonation is also low. So how do you change that appearance, right? Well, grains and malt add all of the color to your beer. And so you're going to want to pick grains that will get your beer to fall within that certain SRM range, which is the color range that stands for Standard Reference Method for that style. For instance, an ESB is on the lower end of that spectrum, but a porter, for instance, will have a higher SRM because of the darker malts that are required. So grain malts that are higher in protein can cause some haze or cloudiness. So if you use things like wheat, rye, oats, barley, or corn, you may find that your beer becomes a little bit more cloudy and you'll have a little bit more work to do on the back end to clear that up. Adding carafoam, dextrin malts, or malts higher in protein can increase head retention though as well. So you may want to add some things if your head retention is supposed to be high. Next, we're going on to flavor. What judges are looking for is malt, hop, fermentation, balance, finish aftertaste, and other flavor characteristics. And what do we mean by fermentation? Well, was your yeast stressed or not? Did it finish clean? Did it have any esters because of temperature control? Those kind of things can have off flavors, both good and bad, that can contribute to your beer. And so choosing a certain yeast may help with flavor just as much as the other ingredients in your beer. Using that same BJCP description for an ESB, this one would have medium to medium high bitterness with supporting malt flavors evident. So we're talking about those malt flavors that are bready, biscuity, nutty, toasty, that kind of thing, right? We talked about that biscuit malt, which would be appropriate for something like an ESB to have that aroma and flavor as you're drinking the beer, having that biscuity and bready flavor. It should have some hop flavor that's moderate to moderately high. So you're looking for those hops again with those typical floral, earthy, or fruity characteristics. Hop bitterness should be noticeable, but it should not dominate the malt flavors. It's not an IPA, right? And so it gives you a range in those vital statistics, as we talked about previously, to make sure you're not overdoing your hops. So that may be adding your hops later in the boil or adding less of them during the same times in order to reach that appropriate IBU, which is International Bitterness Units. And that gives the bitterness of your beer. Adding too many hops too early in the boil can bring that number really high, and it would be outside of that characteristic. Not adding enough and adding them all towards the end may not bring enough characteristics to the beer as well. So it can go both ways. So how do you change the recipe to match the style for flavor? Well, again, you're choosing those malts that will help deliver those flavors like we talked about, whether it's biscuit, whether it's chocolate, whether it's honey malts, right? You're choosing variety of hops that are consistent with the described flavors also. Another thing that you can do to change your process rather than just your recipe is to think about your mash temperature, right? So when you're mashing your grains, you're not just extracting sugars, you're extracting certain types of sugars, right? And so they're either the long chain sugars that will stick around and linger in your beer and make your beer a little bit more sweet, or the shorter chain sugars that are easier to break down. And so by changing your mash temperature, for instance, that can make it more dry or more malty. And so I like to think of it as anything under 150 will add to the dryness of your beer, but that will help with that crisp component to a pale ale, an IPA, that kind of thing like that, a Pilsner. Those in the 140 temperature range Fahrenheit will do really, really well. When you want a more balanced approach, something between 150 to 154 is appropriate. And then things that are maltier and sweeter, such as a porter or a stout, maybe higher than 155. That's going to leave a little bit of that residual sweetness back and help you get that sweetness in your beer. If you have a beer style that you're going for and you found, it's a little too sweet, then you can just drop that mash temperature the next time. You may not need to change another thing in your entire beer recipe other than just doing that one thing. The recipe itself could be fine. Next, we're talking mouthfeel. What are judges looking for when it comes to the mouthfeel of your beer? They're looking at the body, the carbonation level, the warmth, creaminess, or astringency that might be in your beer, or other palate sensations that your mouth can pick up when you're drinking the beer. Using that ESB style again, medium to medium full body, low to moderate carbonation, although bottle versions may be a little bit higher, and stronger versions may have a slight alcohol warmth, but this character shouldn't be too high. This is the description in BJCP for that guideline. So how do we change that recipe in order to match a style? Well, you go for those high protein malts and increased mash temperature. So those high protein malts and increasing mash temperature can add to that perceived body and creaminess if that's what's required. And also lactic acid or lowering that pH or lowering the mash temperature will enhance the dryness, more astringent, or enhance those bitter flavors if it's like an IPA or a Pilsner, for instance. Again, we talked about that mash temperature and why that's important. It's also important for mouthfeel. Water profile is also important. So for instance, specific styles like a hazy IPA, you want to use a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 chloride to sulfate ratio to get that pillowy mouthfeel that you want for that hazy IPA. But you would do the opposite for a West Coast IPA to increase that perceived bitterness. So instead, you would have a 1-to-2 or a 1-to-3 chloride to sulfate ratio for a West Coast IPA. So this brings us back down to the last section of that scoring sheet, the overall impressions. What are judges looking for? Well, in short, judges are looking for the overall drinking pleasure and giving you additional suggestions to maybe help meet that based on all of the other scores that they've given you when they were going through the score sheet, one characteristic at a time. So can you change the overall impression? Well, not much. There's not really anything to change if you've changed all of the other characteristics individually. Again, you may not even need to change your recipe at all. Your recipe may be solid, but adjusting something like mash temperature or your water profile could make a huge difference in the appearance and the perception of your beer to the judges. So with that, I know we touched on a lot of different topics, and I'm happy to answer any questions or comments that you guys have in the comment section below. Happy to help out. So leave any questions or comments below, and I'll do my best to get back to every one of you. Also, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot, and you guys are what makes this channel possible. I appreciate you. Happy brewing, and cheers. Hey, thanks for watching my video. You're awesome. You want to be even more awesome? Hit that join button and become a member. You'll get exclusive members-only recipes and other perks like brew day sheets, and watch my videos early as they drop before anyone else. So hit that join button below, become a member, and be awesome.